Picture a waterhole at dusk. Dust settles over cracked mud. A herd shifts and drinks, unbothered, while a hidden speaker in the grass plays a lion's growl. Ears twitch, a few heads lift. That's it. To your ear, a lion growling sounds like the scariest thing on the continent. To an elephant, it barely registers as news. Then the same speaker plays something else. Not a roar, not a threat, not even a raised voice. Just a person, talking, the way you might talk while making tea. And the herd doesn't just startle, it runs. Full speed, no hesitation, gone. You'd expect the opposite. Lions are built for killing, claws, fangs, the muscle mass to drop a buffalo in seconds. You humans are not. You're slow. You bruise easily. You'd lose a fight against nearly anything with fur and teeth on that savanna. And yet, when researchers ran this exact test on 19 different species across a South African national park, giraffes, hyenas, zebras, rhinos, warthogs, the pattern held almost every time. The overwhelming majority fled faster, farther, and more completely from a calm human voice than from an actual apex predator. Sit with that for a second. The animal kingdom spent millions of years building an instinct to fear the lion. Whole nervous systems evolved around outrunning claws and ambushes, and that instinct just got quietly overwritten by us, the ones without any of the equipment lions have. Here's the detail that turns this from a curiosity into something stranger. Some of the animals in that study had never personally encountered the specific humans making the recording. No prior hunt, no memory, no direct reason to be afraid. They ran anyway. Whatever this fear is, it isn't only learned through personal experience. It moves through a population like a rumor that everyone somehow already believes. So ask the obvious question. Why would nearly every species on a continent agree, without consulting each other, that the soft, clawless primate is the one creature worth fleeing first? Not the lion, not the leopard. You. The short answer involves guns, but that answer is almost embarrassingly incomplete. This fear predates firearms by tens of thousands of years. It shows up in animals that have never seen a gun, in places humans have barely touched. Something deeper than weaponry taught the natural world to be afraid of you, and the story of what that something is will take you through hidden microphones in the African bush, a bird that walked calmly up to its own extinction, and a mystery involving the disappearance of the largest animals the planet has ever produced. Start with how the fear actually spreads, because it isn't the way you'd expect. A gazelle doesn't need to survive a hunt to learn that humans are dangerous. It can learn the same way you learned not to touch a hot stove after watching your sibling get burned. One animal bolts, the rest of the herd notices, and the lesson installs itself without a single tooth ever making contact. In herding species, a mother's flight response becomes her offspring's flight response before the offspring has any independent memory of danger at all. Fear, in other words, doesn't have to be earned firsthand. It can be inherited like a family recipe, quietly, generation after generation, no explanation required. Now, compare that to how your own hunting method has changed over that same stretch of time. Archaeologists have found sharpened wooden hunting implements dating back roughly 300,000 years, purpose-built for taking down animals many times a human's size. Already, that's an unusual level of ambition for a species without claws, but a lion today hunts almost exactly the way a lion hunted 10,000 years ago. Same teeth, same ambush, same limits. Your species didn't stay still. The spear became the bow. The bow put killing distance between hunter and prey that no animal had ever had to plan around before. Then came traps that worked while you slept. Then firearms that erased the need to get close at all. Then vehicles that could chase something across terrain no predator's legs were built for. Every generation, the threat got harder to predict and harder to escape, and prey animals correctly kept recalibrating. This is why researchers eventually gave humans a specific label, separate from ordinary predators: the super predator. Not because any one of you could win a fair fight against a leopard, you'd lose. Badly. But because across a whole population, Over a whole lifetime, no other hunter on the planet kills as efficiently, as unpredictably, or in numbers this large. A lion stops hunting once it's fed. There's no equivalent ceiling on what a coordinated group of humans can do in a single outing. And that fear doesn't stay contained to the animal feeling it. It leaks outward and rearranges the entire neighborhood. In the hills of Northern California, researchers ran an experiment that played human voices back not to one species, but to an entire food chain at once. Mountain lions, hearing us, grew visibly more cautious, moving slower, keeping more distance. Bobcats, sitting one rung down the ladder, picked up on that shift and pulled back too, hunting less in daylight, staying quieter. And then something unexpected happened further down. Skunks and opossums, the small, unglamorous scavengers usually dodging the mid-sized hunters above them, suddenly found more food, more often because the mid-sized hunters had gotten too nervous to compete as hard. Nobody touched them. The mere sound of a human voice played from a hidden speaker rippled all the way down the food chain and quietly rearranged who ate dinner that night. Think about what that means. Your reputation alone, with no hand lifted, is powerful enough to restructure an ecosystem's daily rhythm from the top, predator down to the smallest scavenger. That's not a fear response. That's closer to a form of ecological gravity, bending the paths of animals who will never once lay eyes on you. Now flip the story entirely, because not every animal got this memo, and the ones that didn't paid for it in the worst possible currency. Picture an island with no large predators at all. No wolves, no big cats, nothing bigger than the birds themselves. For that island's entire evolutionary history, there was simply nothing to be afraid of. So evolution never bothered building the wiring for fear. Why waste the energy on an instinct you'll never need? That island was Mauritius, and the bird was the dodo. When sailors first arrived, the dodo reportedly walked right up to them. Not aggressive, not fleeing, just curious, the way a dog investigates a stranger. It had no framework for recognizing a large approaching creature as a threat, because nothing large had ever been a threat before. That total absence of caution, paired with hunting and the rats and pigs that came ashore with the ships, ended the species in roughly a century. A blink on the timescale a species usually gets. This wasn't a one-off tragedy. It's a pattern with a name, ecological naivete, and it has repeated itself with grim consistency. Look at global bird extinctions since the year 1500, and more than 9 in 10 happened on islands. Not because island birds were weaker or less intelligent, because they'd never had the tens of thousands of years other animals got to slowly learn, generation by generation, that humans belong on the list of things worth running from. You can still see the flip side of this today, and it's oddly touching rather than tragic. Giant tortoises in the Galapagos let tourists walk within arm's reach. Antarctic penguins waddle toward researchers instead of away from them. This isn't ignorance, it's precision. Their fear, where it exists, is calibrated exactly to the threats their ancestors actually faced: leopard seals, orcas, certain hawks, and nothing beyond that. No wasted caution, no margin held in reserve for a danger that never showed up in their evolutionary history. It's about as exact an instrument as fear gets. Now push the timeline back further into something far larger and far more contested. Across multiple continents, in patterns that have divided paleontologists for decades, the arrival of modern humans lines up strikingly with the disappearance of the biggest animals each ecosystem had. Mammoths in the north, ground sloths in South America, some taller than a modern elephant, gone. Giant kangaroos in Australia that would barely be recognizable as kangaroos today, gone. These weren't fragile animals. They'd survived ice ages, climate swings, every natural pressure their continents could throw at them, for tens of thousands of years apiece. Climate change was almost certainly part of what finally ended many of them, and the exact split between climate and hunting pressure is still argued over intensely. But the timing keeps lining up the same way on continent after unrelated continent, tight enough that climate alone struggles to explain it. If human hunting really was a major factor, it means the most dominant creatures the planet had ever produced, the ones built to fear nothing, met you and didn't make it through the encounter. That's not a small claim about what kind of threat you represent in the deep history of this planet. Here's the part of the story that softens all of this, at least a little, because the fear you inspire doesn't only end in tragedy. In some cases, smaller animals have learned to turn it into a shield. Researchers have documented white-tailed deer and moose deliberately giving birth closer to houses and roads than they otherwise would. Not because they've made peace with humans, because the wolves trailing them are even more afraid of that farmhouse than the deer is of the wolf. Picture that for a moment. A deer calculating, correctly, that the predator behind it in the tree line will peel off before it gets near the porch light. Your terrifying reputation, the same one that emptied water holes and rearranged food chains, becomes something a prey animal can hide behind. The most feared creature in the ecosystem turned into an accidental bodyguard. And this fear doesn't just make animals run in the moment, it's rescheduling entire species around the clock. A large global study pulled together data on 62 mammal species across 6 continents and found something remarkable. Near humans, animals shift toward nighttime activity by an average of well over a third, even species that are naturally built to be active in daylight. Deer, boars, coyotes, animals with nothing in their evolutionary history telling them to prefer darkness, quietly rearranging their entire waking lives around avoiding you specifically. Not fleeing one bad encounter, restructuring an entire daily rhythm, everywhere, permanently. So why did this happen? Not one encounter, not one weapon, not one turning point. It's the compounded weight of hundreds of thousands of years, sharpened wood becoming iron, becoming gunpowder, becoming engines, layered onto a hunting style built on planning and coordination that no predator on this planet has ever matched. It's the demonstrated, repeated outcome that when your species enters an ecosystem, its largest and most dominant animals frequently do not make it out the other side, no matter how untouchable they'd been for every age before you arrived. It's a fear precise enough that scientists had to invent a new category just to describe you accurately. And in the saddest cases, it's a fear that simply never got the chance to form at all. The dodo never got it. Hundreds of island species never got it, wiped out within decades of first contact, because the lesson needed generations to take root, and there was no time left to learn it. Somewhere right now, an elephant is standing near a waterhole. It has never met a human. It has no personal memory of ever being hunted by one. And if it hears your voice, calm, unthreatening, utterly harmless by your own account of yourself, it will run. Faster than it would from a lion. Because somewhere back down its bloodline, something learned this lesson the hard way, paid the price for learning it, and passed the warning forward. And in all this time, it has never once needed updating.